The morning sun cast long shadows across the quiet park in downtown Los Angeles as Keanu Reeves walked along the winding path, his faithful companion trotting beside him. To any casual observer, they made an unremarkable pair, a simply dressed man in worn jeans and a faded t-shirt, walking with what appeared to be an ordinary German Shepherd mix. But there was nothing ordinary about either of them. The dog, whom Keanu had named Rex, carried himself with a dignity and alertness that spoke of years of training and discipline. His ears were constantly moving, scanning for sounds, his dark eyes methodically sweeping their surroundings. Most people assumed he was just another rescue dog, lucky enough to find a home with a kind-hearted owner. They had no idea that Rex was a decorated former police K-9 officer with 8 years of service, trained in suspect apprehension, drug detection, and protection work. Keanu had found Rex at the animal shelter 18 months ago. The dog had been retired early after his longtime partner, Officer Martinez, was killed in the line of duty. Rex had fallen into a deep depression, refusing to work with new handlers and spending his days lying motionless in his kennel. The department had reluctantly decided to retire him, hoping that a quiet civilian life might help him heal from the trauma. When Keanu first saw Rex at the shelter, something passed between them, a mutual recognition of loss and the need for healing. Keanu had recently lost his beloved dog, and the grief was still raw. The shelter staff warned him that Rex was withdrawn and might never fully recover his spirit, but Keanu didn't care. He saw something in those intelligent brown eyes that reminded him of himself during his darkest moments. "We understand each other, don't we, boy?" Keanu had whispered during their first meeting, and Rex had placed his massive head on Keanu's knee, the first time he'd shown interest in human contact since his partner's death. Now, as they walked through the park, Rex had regained much of his confidence and joy, though he remained perpetually vigilant. Keanu understood this completely. They were both warriors who had learned to find peace, but never let their guard completely down. Chapter 2. The Setup. The park was unusually busy for a Tuesday morning. Families were out enjoying the mild weather, joggers traced the perimeter paths, and several film students were setting up equipment for what looked like a small production. Keanu pulled his baseball cap lower over his eyes, hoping to avoid recognition. These quiet walks with Rex were sacred to him, moments of normalcy in an otherwise complicated life. Near the central fountain, a group of 4 men in their 20s had gathered around a bench. They were loud, aggressive, and clearly intoxicated despite the early hour. Empty beer bottles lay scattered around their feet, and their voices carried across the park with crude jokes and increasingly hostile observations about the other park-goers. "Look at that pretentious asshole," sneered the apparent leader of the group, a heavily tattooed man named Jake with arms like tree trunks and a perpetual scowl. He was pointing at an elderly man feeding ducks near the pond. "Probably thinks he's better than everyone else." His companions laughed, emboldened by their pack mentality. They were all products of frustrated lives and misplaced anger, the kind of men who looked for targets to make themselves feel powerful. They'd been drinking since the previous night, celebrating Jake's recent release from county jail, and their judgment was severely impaired. "Hey, look at this guy," said another member of the group, a wiry man with nervous energy named Tommy. He was staring at Keanu, who was approaching along the main path with Rex, walking around like he owns the place. "And look at that mutt, probably some expensive designer dog." Jake's eyes focused on Keanu with predatory interest. Something about the man's calm confidence irritated him. Maybe it was the way Keanu moved with quiet assurance, or how he seemed completely at peace with himself and his surroundings. In Jake's world, such serenity was either fake or something to be destroyed. "I hate guys like that," Jake muttered, crushing his empty bottle under his boot. "All zen and superior. Let's go mess with him." Chapter 3. First Contact. Keanu was lost in thought, planning his day and enjoying the simple pleasure of Rex's company, when the 4 men intercepted their path. He immediately sensed the hostility and tension, his body instinctively preparing for trouble. Rex, with his trained awareness, had noticed the men long before they approached and was already shifting into a more alert posture. "Nice morning for a walk, isn't it?" Jake said with false friendliness, blocking Keanu's path. His three companions spread out in a loose semicircle, cutting off easy escape routes. "It is," Keanu replied calmly, his voice steady and non-confrontational. He'd learned long ago that de-escalation was always the first and best option. "Beautiful day. That's a good-looking dog you got there," Tommy added, eyeing Rex with the calculating look of someone evaluating potential value. "Bet he cost you a pretty penny." "He's a rescue," Keanu said simply, his hand moving slightly closer to Rex's head in a protective gesture that didn't go unnoticed by the trained dog. Jake laughed mockingly. "A rescue, right? Bet you tell everyone that." "Makes you sound all humble and caring, doesn't it?" His voice was getting louder, more aggressive. "I bet you're one of those Hollywood types, aren't you? All fake humble and pretending to be regular people." The accusation hung in the air. Keanu could feel the situation escalating and knew he had to make a choice. He could reveal who he was, hoping that might diffuse the situation, or he could continue to try to de-escalate without giving up his anonymity. Rex was growing more tense beside him, his training kicking in as he assessed the threat level. "I'm just trying to enjoy a peaceful walk," Keanu said, taking a small step backward. "I don't want any trouble." "Oh, you don't want any trouble?" Jake mimicked his tone mockingly. "Well, maybe trouble wants you." Chapter 4: The Escalation. What happened next unfolded quickly, the way violence often does. A series of small escalations that suddenly crossed a line into something dangerous. Jake, emboldened by his friends and driven by alcohol and resentment, decided that Keanu's calm demeanor was actually arrogance that needed to be checked. "You know what I think?" Jake said, stepping closer to Keanu. "I think you're one of those rich assholes who thinks he's better than working people like us. Walking around our neighborhood with your fancy dog, looking down on everyone." "This is a public park," Keanu replied evenly. "Everyone has a right to be here." "Everyone has a right," Tommy repeated in a mocking tone. "Listen to this guy. Talks like a lawyer or something." Rex had moved slightly in front of Keanu now, his body language shifting from alert to protective. The dog's ears were forward, his tail straight, and his muscles coiled. Anyone with knowledge of canine behavior would have recognized the signs, but these men were too intoxicated and focused on their human target to pay attention to the animal. "Maybe we should teach this guy some manners," suggested the third man, Marcus, cracking his knuckles. "Show him what happens when you disrespect people in their own neighborhood." Keanu realized the situation was beyond verbal de-escalation. These men were committed to violence, driven by alcohol, ego, and mob mentality. He began calculating distances and angles, his movie training and natural athleticism kicking in. But he also knew that Rex was beside him, and the dog's protective instincts were fully engaged. "Gentlemen," Keanu said, his voice remaining calm, but carrying a new authority. "You really don't want to do this. Just walk away, and everyone can go about their day." Jake's face reddened with anger. "Did this son of a bitch just threaten us?" He turned to his friends. "Did you hear that? He's threatening us." The fourth member of the group, a younger man named Darren, who had been mostly quiet, seemed to have second thoughts. "Maybe we should just leave him alone, Jake. He's not bothering anyone." "Shut up, Darren," Jake snapped. "You always were soft." He turned back to Keanu with renewed aggression. "You picked the wrong day to mess with the wrong people." Chapter 5: The Attack. Jake lunged forward first, his fist aimed at Keanu's face. Keanu, with reflexes honed by years of film training and natural athleticism, easily ducked the clumsy punch and stepped to the side. But as he moved, Tommy came at him from the left while Marcus approached from the right. What none of the attackers expected was Rex. The moment Jake threw the first punch, Rex exploded into action. 8 years of police training and countless hours of suspect apprehension work took over completely. This was what he had been bred for, trained for, and had done professionally for most of his adult life. The months of civilian retirement fell away like a discarded coat, and Rex became what he truly was, a highly trained law enforcement officer. Rex's first move was a textbook takedown. He launched himself at Jake's right arm, the one that had thrown the punch, clamping down with precisely calibrated force. Not enough to cause permanent damage, but more than enough to completely incapacitate the limb and bring the man to the ground. Jake screamed in shock and pain as Rex's training took over, the dog using his weight and leverage to control the suspect exactly as he'd been taught. Tommy, seeing his friend go down, tried to kick Rex away. It was the worst possible decision he could have made. Rex released Jake's arm and pivoted with fluid grace, his hind legs sweeping Tommy's supporting leg out from under him. Tommy crashed to the ground hard, his breath knocked out of him. Marcus hesitated, suddenly understanding that this was no ordinary pet. The dog moved with military precision, his actions coordinated and purposeful. But Marcus was committed now, and he grabbed a broken tree branch, raising it as a weapon. Keanu intercepted Marcus before Rex had to engage a third opponent. Using techniques learned from years of action film training, Keanu disarmed Marcus with a swift move that sent the branch flying and left Marcus's wrist twisted in a painful lock. The entire altercation lasted less than 30 seconds. Chapter 6: The Aftermath. Jake was on the ground, clutching his arm and staring at Rex with a mixture of fear and confusion. Tommy was gasping for breath, trying to understand how a dog had so efficiently put him on his back. Marcus was frozen in place, Keanu's grip still controlling his wrist. Only Darren remained standing, his hands raised in surrender. "What the hell kind of dog is that?" Jake wheezed, scrambling backward across the ground. Rex stood at attention, his eyes moving between the four men, ready to engage again if any of them made another aggressive move. His positioning was perfect, close enough to protect Keanu, but with clear sight lines to all potential threats. His breathing was controlled, his stance balanced. This was a professional at work. "The kind you don't want to mess with," Keanu said quietly, releasing Marcus's wrist. The man stumbled backward, rubbing his joint and staring at both Keanu and Rex with new respect and fear. A small crowd had gathered at a safe distance, drawn by the commotion. Several people were recording with their phones, and Keanu could see someone talking on a cell phone, likely calling the police. He knew his anonymity was about to end, but that seemed less important now than making sure these men understood the gravity of what had just happened. "Rex is a retired police dog," Keanu explained, his hand moving to rest on the dog's head. Rex leaned slightly into the touch while maintaining his vigilant watch over the four men. 8 years of active duty. He was trained to take down armed suspects and protect his partner. You gentlemen just attacked a civilian under the protection of a decorated law enforcement officer. The words hit Jake like a physical blow. A police dog. He'd attacked someone who was with a police dog. The legal implications began filtering through his alcohol-clouded mind, and the color drained from his face. Chapter 7: Recognition. As the crowd grew larger, Keanu knew it was only a matter of time before someone recognized him. Sure enough, a young woman near the back of the group suddenly gasped and pulled out her phone. "Oh my God," she said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "That's Keanu Reeves." The effect was immediate and dramatic. The four attackers, who had been processing the information about Rex's law enforcement background, suddenly had to deal with the reality that they had just assaulted one of the most beloved actors in Hollywood. Jake's face went from pale to green. "You guys just attacked John Wick," someone in the crowd said with dark humor, referencing Keanu's famous action movie character. "And his dog is an actual police officer," added another voice. The irony wasn't lost on anyone present. These men had picked arguably the worst possible target for their aggression, a man known for his action roles and kindness, accompanied by a trained law enforcement dog. Tommy was still on the ground, staring up at Keanu with dawning horror. "We're so screwed," he whispered to himself. Marcus had backed several feet away and was looking around desperately, as if searching for an escape route that didn't exist. Darren had sat down heavily on a nearby bench, his head in his hands. "Mr. Reeves," Darren said finally, his voice shaky, "we're really sorry. We didn't know, we were drunk, and Jake was just angry about stuff, and we shouldn't have." He trailed off, realizing how inadequate his words were. Chapter 8: The Police Arrive. The sound of sirens filled the air as 3 patrol cars pulled up to the park. Rex's ears perked up at the familiar sound, and his posture shifted slightly. These were his people, his former colleagues, and Keanu could feel the dog's excitement, despite his professional composure. The first officer out of the lead car was a woman in her 40s with sergeant's stripes on her uniform. She took in the scene quickly, 4 disheveled men on or near the ground, a calm man in casual clothes standing with a German shepherd, and a crowd of about 20 people with phones out recording everything. LAPD, she announced. I'm Sergeant Rodriguez. Can someone tell me what happened here? Before Keanu could respond, an older officer emerged from the second car and stopped short when he saw Rex. His face broke into a huge grin. Rex, Officer Chen called out. Holy shit, is that Rex? Rex's tail began wagging for the first time since the confrontation began. He looked to Keanu for permission, and when Keanu nodded, the dog trotted over to Officer Chen for a reunion. The officer knelt down to scratch Rex's ears and was rewarded with enthusiastic licks. This is Officer Martinez's old partner, Chen announced to the other officers. Rex was one of the best canines we ever had, saved Martinez's life 3 times before. He trailed off, the memory of Martinez's death still painful. Sergeant Rodriguez looked from Rex to Keanu with new understanding. And you are? Keanu Reeves, he said simply. Rex is my dog now. These men attacked us while we were walking through the park. One of the crowd members, an elderly woman who had witnessed the entire incident, stepped forward. Officer, that dog was amazing. When those thugs attacked Mr. Reeves, that dog handled them like a professional. I've never seen anything like it. Chapter 9. Statements and Consequences. As the officers began taking statements, the full picture of what had happened became clear. Multiple witnesses confirmed that Jake and his friends had been drinking in the park, had deliberately confronted Keanu, and had thrown the first punches. The video footage from various phones supported these accounts completely. Jake, sobering up rapidly as the legal consequences became clear, tried to claim that he'd been defending himself. He had a vicious dog with him, he protested. We felt threatened. Officer Chen laughed outright at this. Rex is trained in minimal force application. If he wanted to hurt you seriously, you'd be in the hospital right now, instead of sitting here whining. He used exactly as much force as necessary to neutralize the threat you posed. Sergeant Rodriguez was filling out her report when she looked up at Keanu. Mr. Reeves, I have to ask, did you know Rex was police trained when you adopted him? I did, Keanu confirmed. The shelter told me his background. He'd lost his partner and was having trouble adjusting to retirement. I thought maybe we could help each other heal. And has he shown any aggressive behavior since you've had him? She continued. Keanu shook his head. Rex is the gentlest dog I've ever known. He plays with children at the dog park. He's calm around other animals, and he's never shown any aggression toward anyone. Today was the first time he's had to use his training since retirement, and only because we were attacked. Officer Chen nodded in agreement. That's Rex. He was always perfectly controlled, never used more force than necessary, never engaged unless there was a genuine threat. Martinez used to say Rex could tell the difference between a real bad guy and someone just having a bad day. Epilogue: A New Normal. 1 year after the incident, Keanu and Rex returned to their routine of morning walks in the park. The location held no trauma for either of them. If anything, it had become a symbol of justice served in the power of standing up to bullies. Rex had fully recovered from any anxiety the incident had caused and seemed more confident than ever. He still carried himself with the dignity of his former profession, but he had also learned to simply enjoy being a beloved pet. Children in the neighborhood knew him by name, and he had become a fixture at local dog-friendly events. Keanu often reflected on how randomly the incident had occurred and how it had reinforced his belief in standing up to injustice. He'd never sought out the confrontation, but when it found him, both he and Rex had responded with courage and professionalism. The 4 men who had attacked them were all completing their sentences and court-ordered counseling. Darren, the youngest of the group, had reportedly turned his life around, finding steady employment and cutting ties with his former friends. The others had been less successful in their rehabilitation, but that was their choice to make. As for Rex, he had found his perfect retirement, honored for his service, loved for his companionship, and celebrated for his heroism. He spent his days enjoying long walks, playing with other dogs, and basking in the affection of his famous human companion. Sometimes, on quiet mornings in the park, Keanu would look at Rex and marvel at the journey that had brought them together. A grieving police dog and a man seeking peace had found exactly what they needed in each other. Their bond had been tested by violence and emerged stronger than ever. Rex might have been a former police officer, but he was also something else entirely. He was a hero, a friend, and proof that sometimes the best partnerships come from the most unexpected places. As they walked through the park on this particular morning, Rex's tail wagging and his eyes bright with contentment, Keanu smiled and scratched behind his companion's ears. "Good boy, Rex," he said quietly. "Good boy." And Rex, former K-9 officer, current beloved pet, and forever protector, wagged his tail in agreement and continued his patrol of their peaceful world.